Hello there. Today's keynote is about a book, but it's not just about a book. It's about 8 things that I wish that I'd known many years ago. So it's one of those, I found this now, and it's a little bit too late for me. So hopefully it's not too late for somebody else. The book I'm talking about is called Entrepreneurial Negotiation, and then it has a long subtitle, something like Understanding and Managing the Relationships That Determine Your Entrepreneurial Success. Now, at its core, and it should be said, this is a book by Samuel Dinner and Lawrence Susskind. Now, at its core, there are 8 mistakes. There's more in it, yes, but at its core are 8 mistakes that entrepreneurs make. And I'm going to run you through them. And why are they important from an innovation perspective? You might not be an entrepreneur. You're thinking, what does this have to do with me? Well, I'll tell you. These are not just entrepreneurial mistakes. Even though they're put nicely in that format, and that's a good way to find an audience for the book, these are people mistakes. And when it comes to innovation, a lot of them ring dreadfully true. Let's just say they resonate. Okay, with that said, let's get started. The first one is very simple. Entrepreneurs are self-centered. Yes, they kind of have to be. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 23, and as is kind of obvious by my face, that's some years ago. You have to look at kind of what you're doing and have to have yourself in focus, not because it's a nice human thing to do. And let's not even get to the whole discussion about whether all humans are self-centered. No, because if you're not doing it or you're not moving the needle, then nobody is. It's one of the first rules about being an entrepreneur is that you can't just expect that things happen when you're not there, especially when you're alone or part of a small team. So when you are kind of the entrepreneur, not when you're 50, but when you're starting out. Well, and obviously it's a problem. And what does that have to do with innovation? Well, it has to do with it that when you are innovating, you're thinking of, oh, how do I change? Or how do we change? Or all this sort of thing. And you're like laser focused on this change part, this experimental part. And it's pretty easy when you're innovating, whether you're part of an innovation team or you're just doing an innovation project, or maybe you are running an innovation center. It's pretty easy to get caught up in what you're doing and forget what everybody else is doing. Now, sometimes that's necessary, but a lot of the time it just means that you go like this and the world passes you by, or the rest of the organization or whatever it is, and you're caught flat-footed. This is very much a thing that entrepreneurs do. Sadly, it's also something that's not uncommon in innovation. I've done this. I have definitely done this. Number 2. This is a very motivating image. There's a cat, it believes it's a lion. Yes, in many respects, this can represent strength and power and will and, give me all that sort of good stuff. However, when it comes to entrepreneurs, and I am so guilty of this, and have been so guilty of this, we're overly optimistic. We're like, yes, it can be done, because the same strength that gives you the power to say, we can do it, it might be possible, let's go out and change the world, also make us hopelessly overconfident. Not everyone, but a lot of entrepreneurs, and yours truly is one of them, have been hopelessly overconfident in parts of their career, and to a certain degree still are. So confidence, good. Optimism, good. Over-optimism, shaky. Overconfidence, not without its minuses. The same when it comes to innovation. When you're trying to say, we're going to change the world, well, you kind of need to believe that you can do that. And most of the time, it's just not right. So there's a thin line to walk here. And as an entrepreneur, it's very easy to kind of cross that line, and the same as an innovator. Because at its core, entrepreneurship is about innovation. You go out, you see the world, and you say, this could be different. This could be done for a different group or in a different way, or it could be done, I'm very close to using the word different again, but I won't. You get the point. This one, all too familiar. Entrepreneurs need to win now. The reason for that is usually because they don't have money. Even well-funded startups are usually burning through money very fast. And if you're bootstrapping, like I did and have done several times now, then you're not talking about months, or you are talking about months. You're not talking about years where you have cash flow. You're usually talking about months and sometimes weeks. So you need wins now. You can't say, oh, but it'll be great in 7 years or 40 years down the line. This is going to make a lot of sense. You're simply not in that position. Now, innovation, a little bit different, but often the same. Not so much because innovation has to be fast. A lot of innovation is slow or gradual, or you don't see the long-term effects until a lot later. But you need those quick wins to convince whoever's funding you or who's believing in you or who's kind of supporting you that things happen. Needing to win now? Oh, yes, very recognizable. This one, a little bit more tricky. Entrepreneurs are are kind of fast to compromise. And then I thought, does that actually strike a nerve? Is that true? Have I been fast to compromise? Do I know other entrepreneurs who've compromised fast? And then I realized, yeah. Not so much because they kind of gave up or gave in or let go of their principles or that sort of, not so much the negative part of compromise that we often talk about. Actually not. But when it comes to things like, okay, it doesn't matter. Let's do this. Okay, is it red? Is it blue? That's fine. Let's go. And as an entrepreneur, especially if you're trying to do something big, you need to ignore a lot of small stuff. You need to think that if you're going to do the big thing, then you need to sweat a lot of the small stuff. You need to just accept that it's not going to go your way. And a lot of the times that's good. But it's very easy that the compromises just slowly keep on building up, and suddenly you end up not being able to go where you want to go because you've compromised too much. And because you've had to compromise on price or quality or speed or reach or people or culture, all these sort of things because you wanted something to happen. And it was either a matter of compromising or not going anywhere. And that's a strength. But it's also a weakness because you can get a little bit too used to saying, okay, then we'll do it this way, or then we'll do it that way. And then it's very hard to claw yourself back to that position of here and no further. And I still do this. But it leads us to the next point, which is entrepreneurs are alone. Now, if you do it in a team, if you're 3 people, you're 5 partners, etc., that's great. Many entrepreneurs are alone, and even the ones who are doing it together, well, they're still, to a certain degree, pretty much alone. And with alone, it's not just a matter of who's taking the decisions and who's paying the bills and who's risking the things and who's kind of making the push happen. It's also a mental thing. That if you are, let's say you're married, you might be happily married, which is great, and your spouse, let's just call him a loving husband. His name is Jack. Jack sounds like a decent guy. Jack loves you. Jack supports you. Jack is there for you. And not the least, Jack pays the bills and looks after the children when you're working late nights. But Jack doesn't understand because Jack has never been an entrepreneur. He's never been there. It's a little bit like parents. You can understand a lot of things before you've had kids, or if you haven't had kids about kids. I know that. I worked with kids for many, many years before becoming a father. But there's some things where you have to experience it. And that's not just a kids thing. That's many things in life. The reason kids are so popular is because so many have them, so they can say, well, you don't understand. You won't know anything until you have kids. That's, of course, not true. You will understand a lot of things before you have kids, or if you don't have kids, or if you've never been an entrepreneur. But there's some things that's very, very hard to grasp until you've been there, until you've felt it. And is that different from kids or entrepreneurship or being a professional football player or traveling the world? No, it's not. But it's still a thing. And it's still relevant. And if you're living with a partner or you're friends with somebody, or let's just say you're being supported by parents or whatever it is, you're still going to be alone because they won't get it. And getting it is sometimes very, very important, especially when it's really hard. Then it's really nice to talk to somebody who's been there. And if you have them in your life, mentors, etc., it makes it easier. But at its core, a lot of entrepreneurship happens alone. Not for everyone, not always, but a lot of the time. And that mentality can also play tricks on you, because one thing is you get used to being self-sufficient and you're kind of self-driving and you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, all that sort of good stuff. But it's also easy to kind of get lulled into this idea that nobody else is out there and nobody can help you and nobody understands you. Where at least when we become parents, at least those who make that choice or have that opportunity, there are some people in our lives that we know they've been there, so we can poke them. There's a reason most people connect more with their parents after they've gotten children of their own, because they suddenly, I get it, Mom, I get it, Dad, or I get it, moms, and they're now able to connect on that because they know they've been there with their entrepreneurship. There's not the same, your father was an entrepreneur and now you will be that at some point, because even if you're also an entrepreneur now and you come from entrepreneurial stock, so to speak, it's still very different. And times may have changed, all that sort of thing. So there's a lot of being alone. And that's good, but it's also bad. Sorry, got a little bit misty-eyed from that one. The next is entrepreneurs haggle. Oh, do we haggle? When you are an entrepreneur, it's very easy to kind of lose grasp of the bigger picture and look at the small stuff. It's easy to become transactional. I enjoy watching investor TV shows where you have entrepreneurs coming in and pitching to investors, and the investors saying, well, you want to sell 10% of your company for $1 million. We'll take 30% of your company for $100,000. So how about that? And watching these entrepreneurs squirm and squiggle and try to squeeze out the last drop, it's horrible. And in one of the ones I watched, there's a Danish TV show called The Lion's Den, Løvens Hule. It's become so that some of the investors themselves are like, guys, stop it. There was an episode I saw the other day, and the reason I mentioned this is because it's so spot on, is that they've gotten the pitch has gone well and investors are interested, and they say, hey, we don't really need the money because we have decent cash flow. What we need is your expertise. And they're arguing over what is 3,000 euros. 3,000 euros more or less for the stake in a company, and they're trying to attract investors who will hopefully make them take their business, which was going pretty well, and make it 5 times as big or 10 times as big or 100 times as big. And they said from the beginning, we don't need the money because we have decent cash flow. Hooray for that. But they're still haggling. They're still trying to squeeze that last euro out of them, or in this case, that last kroner out of them. For what? If you're going to be as big as Disney or Coca-Cola or Uber or whatever, why do you care about a few thousand? If you're going for millions and billions, why do you care about the tiny stuff? And that's an entrepreneurial bad trait. This is luckily one of the things that I haven't really done a lot of that myself. This is one of those that I've skipped, sometimes to my detriment, but many times to my big joy. That the entrepreneurial thing for haggling, oh, is it 46%? Is it 49%? Is it this or that? Or, all these small details. Sometimes you need to do that because it's what your life depends on, or at least your professional life. But it gets to be a nasty habit that knowing when to haggle is good, but knowing when not to haggle is also crucial. And entrepreneurs as a species, well, we're not exactly the best at letting that go. Number 7, entrepreneurs relying too much on intuition. Yep, guilty as charged. When you are used to taking the decisions, when you're used to kind of having that gut feeling, say, this way, then you get this tendency. You get this tendency to trust your gut a lot. And that's needed, because if you're constantly second guessing yourself, then you're never going to get anywhere. Then you'll never walk the entrepreneurial road with success. However, let's just say that we as a group, not pointing any fingers at anybody specific, we tend to get a little bit too certain of ourselves, a little bit too certain of, I don't have arguments or data or anything to support it, but we're doing it. And I'm right because I'm the entrepreneur. And the more successful entrepreneurs get, the worse this gets. Those of us who've gotten some punches to the face and the gut and the knees and the heart and a lot of punches, learn a little bit of humility on this one. But for a lot of people, especially successful entrepreneurs, the ones who've made money, who've had successful exits, who've done the thing, they get this idea that not only did I succeed, but it also means that I am now very, very smart and very, very knowledgeable about many things. Not just the stuff you know stuff about. No, that's fair. But just in general. Getting to trust your intuition a little bit too well, that's a risk of entrepreneurship. And if you're successful, it's an even greater risk. Number 8, final one on the mistake list for entrepreneurs in negotiations by the 2 gentlemen. Entrepreneurs deny their emotions. Yep, so true. We power through. We say, let's get it done. We do the all-nighter. We work 1,000,000 hours a week. We tell our loved ones or our pets or our friends, don't have time right now. Busy hustling, busy doing. And while some thrive in that, many of us don't. Many of us are just destroying ourselves. Not because we don't have emotions, but because we think that to succeed, we have to deny them. I found that it's actually pretty useful to be open about your emotions, because you can still keep going, you can still do the stuff, but getting to unload to somebody, say, yeah, it's tough, it's hard. I'm not coughing up blood, we're not there, but like I'm coughing up bitterness, and I'm coughing up exhaustion, and it's terrible and it's hard. I'm still going to do it because I need to, but at least I'm sharing the emotions. I'm getting somebody who understands to say, yeah, Claus, that does sound tough. Do you need a hug? Do you need a pat on the back? Sometimes I tell people, I'm showing you a thing, and I just want you to be happy. I just want you to pat me on the head and say it's great. I don't want feedback. I don't want your critical thinking on it. I don't want you to be quality assurance. I just want you to look at the thing and say, cool, you did a thing, that's awesome. Go you. Because that's what I need at that point. That's what my emotions are kind of ready for. Sometimes I need the feedback. Sometimes I need somebody to say, this is bad. Could you improve this? Or have you thought of this? That's great. But this idea, this ideal that we tell ourselves as entrepreneurs, and we tell each other that we're on offense all the time, famous Nike thing. We're always looking, there's no such thing as defeat, there's only learning, all these sorts of slogans and all this superhuman nonsense about any feedback is good feedback and that sort of thing. Well, it's just, for many of us, it's not true. I'm sure it's true for some, sure, but for many of us, we're these soft, cuddly, small, fluffy animals inside. And we also need to take care of our emotions because they're there and they don't go away just because we deny them. I've done this. I've done this plenty. I try not to do it anymore, but I've done this. And I know so many friends in the entrepreneurial space who have. Denying your emotions don't make them go away, and it definitely doesn't make you a better negotiator. It definitely doesn't make you a better entrepreneur. And when it comes to innovation, well, which is all what this is all about, it doesn't help there either. It really doesn't help. It's okay to be frustrated. I'm sure Thomas Edison was frustrated. Yes, there's a beautiful quote about 10,000 light bulbs or 200 light bulbs or however many, depending on which version of the quote you have. But at times, I think he was pretty damn frustrated. And that's okay. Now, this is what an entrepreneur's desk should look like. It should have their laptop, it should have a phone, and it should have this book. Mine didn't. I've done all of this and more. And I'm not suggesting that you go out and get the book. I mean, sure you can. It would be great. And I'm sure that Messrs. Samuel Dinar and Lawrence Susskind would be delighted to have a few of your dollars pop down into their pockets, and they'd be even more delighted to have you learn from what they're writing. But even if you don't go out and get the book, I hope at least you're going to remember some of these 8 mistakes and make sure that you don't do them. Whether you're an entrepreneur or an innovator, and whether it's in negotiation circumstances or it's just part of your general journey. That's today's keynote. Thank you for listening.